In northern Botswana lies an ancient floodplain over 10 times the size of London. When the floods arrive, a huge network of waterways engulf the land, leaving over 150,000 islands protruding from the wetlands. This unique ecosystem has become a wildlife hotspot, especially for species that need plenty of water to quench their thirst. Many of the animals that live here have adapted to a more amphibious lifestyle, as keeping to solid ground isn't always an option in this ever-changing landscape. Even the big cats can't avoid getting wet, although some have grown more accustomed to the water than others. Today, we'll see how this incredible environment came to be, and why it's produced some of the biggest lions ever documented. In the northern outskirts of the Kalahari Desert lies a vast oasis known as the Okavango Delta. When the water levels rise, it forms a maze of waterways and crystal clear lagoons, so huge it can be clearly seen from space. This giant expanse of wetlands sustains a huge array of wildlife, including more than 500 species of birds, over 150 mammals, and around 60 species of reptiles. But only a small fraction of the water that floods the delta comes from local rainfall. Each year around 10 billion cubic metres of water arrives here following a 1,600-kilometre journey, originating from heavy rainfall in the Angolan highlands. The water cascades down to lower ground, forming the Okavango River, also known as the Okavango River. It then runs along the Angolan border for some distance before passing through Namibia into Botswana, where it eventually fans out into the delta, and with no outlet to the sea, it instead saturates the land, eventually covering 16,000 square kilometres at the peak of the flood season. It didn't always used to be this way though. Some 60,000 years ago, the river would flow further south and deposit it into a Great Lake. That was before a series of huge earthquakes almost entirely blocked the flow of water. What used to be Lake Makgadikgadi, which was thought to have covered some 100,000 square kilometres, has now dried up into massive salt pans. Although they're largely deserted for much of the year, heavy rainfall, which usually arrives between November and December, fills a portion of the empty salt plains. Astonishingly, flamingos migrate here to lay their eggs as the water levels drop, knowing that few predators will be willing to endure the salty waters in order to prey on their hatchlings. Although animals still live here, most are forced to migrate during the dry season, and much of the wildlife that once inhabited Makgadikgadi has relocated further north, closer to the bountiful wetlands of the Okavango Delta. This floodplain of unquestionable natural beauty is characterised by its weaving waterways, pristine lagoons and countless islands, many of which have some unlikely architects. Papyrus shoots, famously utilised by the ancient Egyptians to make their scrolls, are plentiful here. They're extremely tough and indigestible for many animals. These thirsty plants grow so densely that they can block waterways. Large animals such as elephants and hippos trample over plants to get to and from the water, creating narrow pathways which can be seen clearly from above. The foundations for many of the islands found in the delta have even less likely architects. Termite mounds, which are impervious to water, collect debris deposited during the flood season, which then hardens when the water levels drop. Over the course of many years, they can grow to form small land masses able to support plants and trees, which in turn traps even more debris. This process has formed a huge percentage of the islands found dotted throughout the delta. Although the wet season begins in November and later peaks in January, much of the delta doesn't experience very high water levels at this time. This is because floodwaters from the Angolan highlands don't arrive until May, due to the sheer distance the water has to travel. Despite water levels dropping considerably, some areas of the delta remain flooded year-round. This constant supply of water makes the delta a hotspot for Cape buffalo, who can be seen roaming the floodplains in enormous herds. These creatures are massive, with some males weighing nearly a ton. They are also highly aggressive and will often charge lions if the herd feels threatened by them. Armed with two sharp horns and the males with a shield-like base atop their head, evolved to prevent damage whilst battling other bulls to determine their ranking within the herd. Despite this, lions are known to frequently hunt them, and by nature the two are worst of enemies, with Cape buffalo known for not only charging them, but also targeting their cubs. Due to the dangers involved, many lions won't target Cape buffalo if there's other easier prey to be found. But a buffalo of any size is packed full of nutritious protein, so strong groups of lions as well as some very experienced hunters will target them regardless. However, in order to pursue Cape buffalo in an environment like this, these lions have adapted to constantly tracking them across boggy marshlands and through swamps. It's the combination of the physically demanding pursuit of their prey and the abundance of battle-hardened Cape buffalo which are thought to be the reasons for lions of the Okavango Delta being so big and muscular. But in this vast ecosystem, some territories play more to these factors than others. Near the mouth of the delta lie a cluster of islands known as the Duba Plains, a place where dry landscape is fractured by large expanses of swampland and encircled by deep, dangerous waterways that remain flooded throughout the year, and are always teeming with hippos known for their territorial nature, and huge Nile crocodiles who patiently lay in wait for their next meal, meaning those that live here remain trapped indefinitely. These isolated lands are home to 3 prides of lions, with the Tsaro Pride holding the most valuable territory. That's because it's also home to a huge herd of buffalo, thought to be over 1,000 strong. Given the abundance of this one species of prey, the Tsaro Pride have become specialised buffalo hunters, relentlessly hunting this one herd and rarely allowing them out of their sight. Not only must the Tsaro lions contend with a wall of horns in order to feed the pride, but they must also regularly wade through swamps and swim across waterways in pursuit of their prey. And it's not just the adults navigating the dangerous wetlands. Tsaro cubs must conquer their fear of water at an early age or risk being left behind. They will also have to learn how to hunt by watching the adults and from play fighting with their siblings, in order to prepare themselves for when they're old enough to become fearsome buffalo hunters themselves. Dereck and Beverly Joubert have been documenting African wildlife for decades, whilst also being heavily involved in conservation work. They both became fascinated by the Duba Plains and the massive swamp cats that lived there. After studying them for some time, they later teamed up with National Geographic to produce 2 documentaries on these unique lions. In 2008, they released Relentless, which focused on portraying the brutal conflict between the Tsaro Pride and the Cape buffalo, and later releasing The Last Lions, which follows one extraordinary lioness's battle for survival. The results were breathtaking, with both capturing the essence of this extraordinary environment and the daily struggles for survival that take place there. Relentless showcases astonishing footage of the Tsaro Pride hunting the Cape buffalo and the bitter dynamic between them. Both documentaries feature some of the most iconic lions ever documented. Silver Eye is a lioness who features heavily in both. Her name derives from her cloudy right eye, yet despite being partially blind, was one of the most fearless hunters within the pride. She was also infamous for her conflicts with other Tsaro lionesses, and her brutal tendency to target their cubs. Another iconic lioness is Mardi Tau, who The Last Lions is based upon. Her astonishing bravery and dedication to her cubs is clear to be seen throughout. The Last Lions also delves into the history of Mardi Tau and Silver Eye's relationship, which in itself is a story for the ages. All the Tsaro lionesses featured were clearly a force to be reckoned with, characterised by their wide necks, thick chests and broad shoulders. The Duba Boys also appear in both these documentaries, and their reign over these lands is legendary. These 2 colossus males formed one of the most dominant lion coalitions ever to exist. They controlled various territories for around a decade, at their peak ruling over all 3 of the prides inhabiting the Duba Plains, and saw many generations of their cubs reach adulthood, whilst normally a coalition of 2 lions will be lucky to see just 1 generation mature. They both died within a year of each other between the years 2007 and 8, and were estimated to be 17 years old at the time. The muscular build of the Tsaro lions makes them some of the biggest lions on Earth, if not the biggest, with Dereck Joubert estimating that large females could weigh up to 375 pounds, whilst the biggest males could weigh over 550, although no official measurements have been taken. But for any lion it's no easy feat to make it to adulthood, at which point the males are ousted from the pride and must find a territory of their own, whilst for the lionesses lucky enough to reach motherhood, there's only so much they can do to ensure the safety of their cubs. Their survival relies heavily on the pride's dominant males defending their territory from marauding lions. For when kings are overthrown, the victors will kill any juveniles knowing they're offspring of the fallen rulers. With so much at stake, it's not unusual for males to fight to the death, and often sustain some gruesome injuries in these conflicts. But with risk comes reward by way of being the first ones to feast when the pride makes a kill, and of course the right to mate with the lionesses of the pride, although sometimes not always guaranteed. Considering all this and the rich territory and fearsome prides they controlled, the Duba Boys' reign seems all the more impressive.